The bitter Montana wind cut through Nathan Zane's cabin like a knife through cloth, finding every gap in the rough-hewn logs. Outside, the December of 1878 had wrapped the world in white, burying his small ranch under 3 feet of snow. Inside, the fire in the hearth struggled against the relentless cold, offering little comfort to the 2 small boys huddled before it. "Pa, when's it gonna get warm?" 7-year-old Thomas asked, his voice small against the howling wind. His younger brother, 5-year-old Samuel, said nothing, just pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Nathan looked at his sons, guilt weighing heavier than the snow on the roof. It had been 2 years since Margaret had died during that terrible fever that swept through the territory. 2 years of him trying to be both father and mother to 2 boys who deserved better than what he could give them. The ranch was failing, the winter was harsh, and Nathan was running out of hope. "Soon, Tommy," he lied, stoking the fire with another precious log. "It'll be warm soon." The truth was, they were nearly out of firewood. The storm had come earlier than expected, and with it a cold so fierce it froze a man's breath before it left his lungs. 3 more days like this and they'd be burning furniture. A sudden gust rattled the shutters, making Samuel flinch. The boy hadn't spoken more than a handful of words since watching his mother being lowered into the cold ground. Nathan's heart broke anew at the sight of his sons pale, thin, and shivering. He'd failed them, failed Margaret. How about a story? He offered, trying to conjure warmth from words where the fire couldn't provide it. "The one about the cowboy and the wild Mustang." Before Thomas could answer, a sound cut through the wind, the unmistakable jingle of a harness bell. Nathan frowned. No one in their right mind would be out in this weather, not unless they were desperate or lost. "Stay by the fire," he instructed, reaching for his rifle. The boys watched, wide-eyed, as he moved to the frosted window, scraping away enough ice to peer into the swirling white. A wagon was approaching, moving slowly through the deep snow. The horses' 2 sturdy Percherons strained against their harnesses, steam billowing from their nostrils. The driver was bundled so thoroughly against the cold that Nathan couldn't make out a face, just a shape hunched against the elements. "Pa," Thomas's voice quavered. "It's all right," Nathan assured him, though he kept the rifle close as he unbarred the door. The cold rushed in like a living thing, hungry and vicious. He squinted against it, calling out, "Hello there, you're welcome to shelter, but fair warning, we don't have much." The wagon lurched to a halt. The driver stood, revealing a slender frame that made Nathan rethink his assumptions. As the figure descended, the hood fell back, exposing a woman's face flushed with cold but determined. Her hair, the color of chestnuts in autumn, whipped around her face, partially escaping from beneath her hood. "Thank you," she called back, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "I've supplies, food and firewood." Nathan blinked in surprise, then hurried to help her. Up close, he saw she was perhaps in her late 20s, with eyes the color of a summer sky. "Madam, you shouldn't be out in this," he chided, taking the reins of her team. "Neither should you," she replied with unexpected spirit, "but here we both are." She turned toward the back of her wagon, revealing it was laden with wooden crates, sacks, and most precious of all, bundled firewood. "I'm Josephine Vance, the schoolteacher from Silver Creek." "Nathan Zane," he replied, bewildered. "This is mighty kind, but why?" She was already hefting a bundle of wood. "Questions later, Mr. Zane. Your boys need warmth first." Stunned by this whirlwind of a woman, Nathan helped her carry supplies into the cabin. The boys stared wide-eyed as Josephine entered, bringing with her a flurry of snowflakes and something else, an energy that seemed to push back against the gloom. "Hello there," she greeted them, setting down the firewood and immediately removing her gloves to warm her hands by the meager fire. "My goodness, this won't do at all." Within minutes, she had Nathan hauling in more wood, stoking the fire to a roaring blaze that soon had the cabin warmer than it had been in weeks. From her supplies came potatoes, carrots, and a ham that set the boys' mouths watering. She commandeered Nathan's kitchen as if she'd been cooking there for years. "Miss Vance," Nathan began, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected invasion. "Joe, please," she corrected, efficiently peeling potatoes. And before you ask again why I'm here, I'm the school teacher. I know every child within 20 miles, including Thomas and Samuel, though they haven't been to school this month. Her eyes, when they met his, held no accusation, only understanding. When children stop coming, I find out why. Nathan's pride warred with his gratitude. We've been managing. Clearly, she replied dryly, glancing at the thin blankets and the boy's hollow cheeks. Mr. Zane, there's no shame in needing help. That's what communities are for. As the stew simmered, filling the cabin with a savory aroma that seemed to chase the last shadows of cold from the corners, Josephine sat with the boys. To Nathan's amazement, she produced a book from her satchel and began to read, her voice animated and warm. Thomas was instantly captivated. Even more remarkable was Samuel's reaction. The boy edged closer to her, his eyes fixed on the pictures she showed them. Nathan watched, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't just the physical warmth returning to the cabin, it was something else entirely, something he'd thought had been buried with Margaret. When she finished the story, Josephine looked up to find Nathan staring. She offered a small, uncertain smile. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. No, he said quietly. No, I don't mind at all. The stew was the best meal they'd had in months. As they ate, Josephine explained that she'd been making rounds to check on families affected by the storm. She'd brought supplies donated by townspeople, a community effort to ensure no one went without during the harsh winter. You can't possibly be visiting every family in this weather, Nathan said. Only those I'm worried about, she replied. Her gaze drifted to the boys, who were eating with enthusiastic focus. I was afraid you might be in trouble out here with no close neighbors. Nathan's pride prickled again, but it was hard to maintain in the face of her genuine concern. It's been a difficult year, he admitted. The ranch isn't producing enough. I've been thinking about selling, moving to town. Papa, no, Thomas protested, looking up from his bowl. This is our home, Nathan's heart sank. Sometimes we have to make hard choices, son. Perhaps, Josephine suggested carefully, there are other options. The conversation shifted then, as she told the boys stories about their classmates and promised them they'd have a special place when they returned to school. Samuel actually smiled when she mentioned the class had adopted a litter of kittens that lived in the schoolhouse. Outside, the storm continued to rage. When Nathan looked out the window at the darkening sky, concern etched his features. You can't travel back tonight, it's too dangerous. Josephine agreed reluctantly. I had hoped the storm might ease, but she glanced at the window where snow continued to accumulate against the glass. If you're certain it's no imposition. You've brought warmth and food to my children, Nathan said simply. The least I can offer is shelter. That night, Nathan gave Josephine his bed, insisting he would sleep by the fire with the boys. As he laid out his bedroll, Thomas whispered, I like Miss Vance, Pa. She makes things better. Nathan glanced toward the small bedroom where their unexpected guest had retired. Yes, he murmured, she does. In the morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed. Sunlight glittered across unbroken snow, painfully bright. Josephine emerged from the bedroom to find Nathan already up, cooking breakfast with some of the supplies she'd brought. Good morning, he greeted her. Hope you slept well. Better than I expected, she admitted, smoothing her rumpled dress. Though I'm afraid I'm not very presentable this morning. Nathan thought she looked lovely, with her hair loose around her shoulders and sleep still softening her features, but he kept that observation to himself. The boys are still sleeping. They haven't been this warm in weeks. Josephine's expression grew serious. Mr. Zane, Nathan, please. Nathan, she corrected with a small smile. I meant what I said about options. Silver Creek needs good men like you. The smithy is looking for an apprentice, and Ben Miller talks of selling his carpentry shop. I'm a rancher, Nathan said, though without conviction. It's all I know. Is it what you love? She asked, her gaze steady. The question caught him off guard. Love. He'd loved Margaret. He loved his boys. The ranch had been a means to an end, a way to provide, to build something for his family. But the land was unyielding, the work endless, and the rewards too few. I wanted to build something, he finally said. For my sons. There are many ways to build a legacy, she replied softly. one that doesn't leave you all shivering and hungry." Their conversation was interrupted by the boys waking, Samuel's small face lighting up at the sight of Josephine still there. She immediately involved them in preparing breakfast, teaching them a silly song as they worked. Nathan watched, struck by how natural she was with them and how easily they responded to her. After breakfast, it was time for Josephine to leave. The boys protested, especially Samuel, who actually spoke up. "Stay, Miss Vance, please." She knelt to his level, touching his cheek gently. "I have to check on other children, Samuel, but I'll be back. And soon you'll come to school, yes." He nodded solemnly, and she sealed the promise with a small leather-bound book she pressed into his hands. "Practice your letters until then." Nathan helped her prepare the wagon for departure, loading it with far less than she'd arrived with. She'd left them with enough firewood and supplies to last at least 2 weeks. "I can't repay this," Nathan said as he secured the wagon's rear gate. "It's not a debt," Josephine insisted. "It's what neighbors do." "We're hardly neighbors. You rode ours through a blizzard." She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Perhaps I have selfish motives. The school board pays me based on attendance, you know. I need your boys back in class." Nathan laughed, surprising himself with the sound. How long had it been since he'd laughed freely? "Well, if it's for your salary, then I suppose we'll have to oblige." As she climbed onto the wagon seat, she looked down at him, suddenly serious. "Think about what I said, Nathan, about options. Silver Creek could use a man like you." "I will," he promised, and found that he meant it. He and the boys stood in the yard, watching until her wagon disappeared over the ridge. The cabin felt strangely empty in her absence, despite being warmer and better stocked than it had been in months. That night, as the boys slept peacefully by a well-fed fire, Nathan took out paper and pencil and began to write a letter to Ben Miller about his carpentry shop. 2 weeks later, Nathan hitched their own wagon and, with the boys bundled against the cold, made the journey to Silver Creek. The town was small but vibrant, a hub for the surrounding ranches and farms. They arrived just as school was letting out, children spilling from the white clapboard schoolhouse with shouts and laughter. Thomas spotted her first. "Miss Vance," he called, waving frantically. Josephine turned, her face brightening at the sight of them. She said something to the children around her, then hurried toward their wagon. "You came," she said, breath fogging in the cold air. Her eyes searched Nathan's. "All of you." "We did," Nathan confirmed, "and we're staying. I've spoken with Ben Miller. I'm buying his shop and there's living quarters above it." The joy that spread across her face warmed him more than any fire could have. "That's wonderful news. The boys will be able to attend school regularly, and I'll be closer to the schoolteacher," Nathan finished, surprising himself with his boldness. "If she doesn't mind the attention." A blush colored Josephine's cheeks. "I believe she'd welcome it." Over the next months, as winter gradually released its grip on the land, Nathan established himself in Silver Creek. The skills he'd used maintaining the ranch translated well to carpentry, and he discovered a talent for fine woodworking that brought customers from neighboring towns. The boys thrived in school, with Samuel slowly emerging from his shell under Josephine's patient guidance. And Josephine. She became a regular visitor to their quarters above the shop, bringing books and baked goods, staying for dinner and lingering afterward to talk with Nathan long after the boys were asleep. They spoke of everything: her childhood in Boston, his dreams for his sons, the books she loved, the pieces he crafted. On a warm evening in May, they walked together along the creek that gave the town its name. The setting sun painted the water with gold, and wildflowers nodded in the gentle breeze. Nathan had never felt so at peace. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small wooden box intricately carved with flowers and vines. "I made it." Josephine took it, running her fingers over the detailed work. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Your craftsmanship has become exceptional. Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple silver ring with a small pearl. Nothing extravagant, but it had cost him a month's profits. Josephine's eyes widened. "Nathan, I know it hasn't been that long," he said quickly. "And perhaps I should wait, but I've learned that life doesn't always give you the time you think you have." He took her hand, the box balanced between them. You brought warmth back into our lives when we were cold in every way that matters. You made a home feel possible again. I love you, Josephine. Will you marry me? Tears glistened in her eyes. The boys helped me pick the pearl, Nathan finished with a smile. They're quite anxious for a mother, especially one they already adore. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Nathan Zane. They were married in July, beneath an arbor. Nathan crafted himself, with the boys proudly standing beside them. The entire town turned out, celebrating not just a union but a restoration, a family rebuilt from grief and loneliness into something new and joyful. That winter, when the snow returned to blanket Silver Creek, the Zane family gathered in their warm home above the carpentry shop. The fire crackled merrily in the hearth, but it wasn't the only source of warmth in the room. Josephine, now 7 months pregnant with their third child, sat between Thomas and Samuel, reading to them from a new book. Nathan watched from his workbench, where he was putting the finishing touches on a cradle. The scene before him was everything he'd once feared lost forever, not just physical comfort, but the profound warmth of family, of love, of home. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious over there?" Josephine asked, glancing up to find his eyes on her. Nathan smiled, setting down his tools and moving to join them by the fire. "I was thinking about a cold night not so long ago when my sons shivered beside a dying fire and a stubborn schoolteacher appeared like an angel in the snow." "I wasn't an angel," she laughed, "just a nosy neighbor." "You were everything we needed," Nathan said simply, taking her hand. "Everything I didn't know to hope for." Samuel, no longer the silent child he'd once been, leaned against Josephine's side. "Read the next part, Ma," he urged, using the name he'd bestowed on her the day of the wedding. As her voice filled the room again, Nathan closed his eyes briefly in gratitude. Outside, the winter might rage, but within these walls, the warmth would never fade again. 5 years later, Nathan stood in the doorway of their expanded home, watching as Josephine chased their youngest daughter through a garden bursting with summer flowers. Thomas, now 12 and apprenticing part-time in the carpentry shop, was helping Samuel build a birdhouse nearby. Their middle child, 3-year-old Margaret, named for the mother the boys still remembered in quiet moments, was solemnly arranging stones in a pattern only she understood. The ranch was long sold. The harsh memories of those desperate days faded like old photographs. In their place were new memories: Josephine's face as she held their firstborn daughter, the boys' pride at their first woodworking projects, family picnics by the creek, evenings of reading and music and laughter. Josephine caught sight of him watching and paused in her game, her smile as bright as the day he'd first seen it. She was still teaching, beloved by the children of Silver Creek, though she'd taken a year off after each of their daughters was born. Nathan's carpentry business had prospered, his reputation for quality craftsmanship spreading throughout the territory. "Wool gathering again?" she asked, coming to join him on the porch, their youngest daughter Charlotte toddling after her. "Remembering," he corrected, putting an arm around her waist, "and being grateful." She leaned into him, understanding without words. They had built this life together, plank by plank, day by day, creating something neither could have imagined on that bitter winter night when fate or Providence had brought her to his door. "I love you," he said simply, "and I love you." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the laugh lines that had replaced the worry lines of years past. "All of you." As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across their yard, Nathan called the children in for supper. They came running, a whirlwind of energy and chatter that filled the house with noise and life. The table that Nathan had crafted when they first moved to town was now surrounded by 5 children, his 2 sons, nearly men now, and the 3 daughters who had Josephine's eyes and spirit. After the meal, as had become their tradition, they gathered in the sitting room. Nathan took his fiddle, an instrument he'd learned to play in these peaceful years, and drew the bow across the strings. Josephine's voice joined the melody, then the children's, a harmony that spoke of all they'd built together. Outside, the Montana sky deepened to indigo, stars appearing one by one like distant campfires. Inside, the warmth of family wrapped around them all, a warmth that had begun with a desperate act of kindness and grown into a love that sustained them through all seasons. Nathan caught Josephine's eye across the room, and in that glance was the acknowledgement of their journey from a cold cabin where two little boys shivered beside a dying fire, to this home overflowing with light and love. She had brought warmth in more ways than he could count, and he had learned that sometimes salvation comes not in the form you expect, but in the form you need most. As the last notes of the song faded, Nathan set down his fiddle and opened his arms to his family. They came to him, his sons now tall enough to look him in the eye, his daughters with their mother's laugh and Josephine still the heart of it all. "Another song, Pa?" Thomas asked. "Another story, Ma," Samuel echoed. Josephine smiled, that same smile that had first pushed back the darkness years ago. "How about the one about the cowboy and his sons and the schoolteacher who got lost in a snowstorm?" "That's not how it happened," Nathan protested with a laugh. "You knew exactly where you were going, did I?" She asked, her eyes twinkling. Or was I just following my heart? As the night deepened around their bright home, Nathan knew the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that she had found them, brought them warmth when they needed it most. And together they had built a life filled with love that would endure through all the winters yet to come.